Hi guys, welcome back. In today's tutorial, we are going to explore botanical illustration with a focus on Ranunculus and Lisianthus. So let's get started. So we do lots of floral illustration here on the channel because I love flowers. And you might be wondering, well, what's botanical illustration? And today I kind of want to just talk about capturing what you see in front of you. When you are illustrating plants, you want to understand the forms. Are the leaves toothy or smooth? Is the stamen wide or flat or really round and small? So looking at those details and being able to capture them, and that's what botanical illustration is all about. Of course, it can get very, very detailed, but I am going to do my own perfectly imperfect spin on it. Okay, to start, I have my little notebook. I'm using my bullet journal for this, and I've got a pencil, and then I've got the ranunculus. So it's great if you can have the specimen there with you, or at least a photo. You could go buy a flower, or you could just go out into the forest or the meadow if you don't live in a city and, pick something and try to capture what you've brought home with you. Anyways, so what I'm doing here is I'm just looking at what's in front of me, and I want to try to capture that. I'm starting with that really, really round, tiny center, the stamen, and then I'm doing these layers and layers and layers of petals, and the ranunculus has this beautiful sort of 1,000 petals, and so I'm going out from the center, and the petals are sort of getting larger as I go out, and then I'm drawing this little bud. So let's talk about this again, but in pen so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I've started with that tiny center, and then I'm doing these lines, line upon line upon line, to show these many petals. And some of them are just lines, and then some of them are sort of a little shape, like a closed-in area that I mean to represent a petal. And then others are just all connecting petals, and I sort of go out and out and out in layers and layers, and I'm not worried about getting it perfect. And then I'm doing this wonky stem, and I'll add a little color or a little extra ink to one side of the stem, and that just shows a little shadow. And then I've also grabbed the little bud from the ranunculus here too, so I can look at it, and I'm just, studying what's in front of me. I'm looking at the shape of the bud. It's very round, and those little leaves that are sort of enclosing it, and I just want to capture those elements. So sometimes on the channel we just do a tutorial where we paint a fox or we draw a teapot and we go through it step by step. But more often than not, what I really want to do is give you guys the tools to draw whatever you want so that you don't need me. And that's what botanical illustration is really all about, is looking at what's in front of you and taking a moment to capture what's there and to look at those tiny details and to get them on the page. And you don't need to draw things perfectly if you can capture some of the essence of the plant. And I wanted to mention that before this next part because I'm starting in pen and I'm trying to draw that ranunculus flower exactly as it is. So that petal that I just did is that one there, that big floppy one on the bottom. And now I'm trying to draw that one beside it, and then the one that's a little lower, and you can see me working from right to left and adding a little bit of line shading. Now it's gonna look a little different because the camera is above and I was looking at it on more of an angle. So the foreshortening is slightly different, and it brings me to an important point, which is that sometimes looking at things dead on, or even taking a picture of something so that you sort of flatten this three-dimensional image into a 2D image, can be so helpful for drawing. I only drew from photos for a really long time, and it's only now that I've started to draw from life. But all I'm doing here is just looking at it closely. Of course, I started in pencil, and I'm just trying to capture what is there right beside me. Just going one petal at a time and adding a bit of a jagged line across the top because these petals, of course, aren't perfect. Adding a little bit of line shading to show that depth, to give that flower a bit of depth. Trying to capture that wonky curve of the ranunculus stem and just add a little bit of shadow, of course, there as well. So that's, again, what it's all about when it comes to botanical drawing. It's just looking and capturing, and it does not have to be perfect. And here I'm just adding some more sketches to my overall sketch. So I kind of want to do a one-page illustration illustrating the ranunculus plant. So here I'm going to draw out another bud, and then they have these funny little jagged, raggedy leaves. So of course I want to add one of those to my illustration, my overall piece. And then I wanted to take another stab at the sort of top-down view of the ranunculus and try my best to capture these multiple petals. Now the first illustration, I really like it, but it's a little more stiff, which is fine. And here I'm going really sketchy, and I'm just doing these sketchy lines to show those many, many petals, and they get, of course, a little wider and floppier as I move out, but the center is really just these many, many lines around that tiny little circular stamen sort of buried in the middle. So that's the ranunculus. I've tried it a few different ways. It's just a notebook sketch, so I don't need to feel any pressure to get it right. And now I have this beautiful illustration in my journal to enjoy. Next flower that I'm going to illustrate is the Lisianthus, and Lisianthus are like these casual roses. They're so pretty and floppy and simple, and the first thing I'm starting with is in pencil, is I'm trying to capture the shape, just the overall shape. Where are the two flowers? Where do those two buds sit? How does it all sort of fall on the page? I don't need to worry about anything other than just the placement. Then I've gone back in, added a bit of detail, but I want to do most of the detail in pen so that you can really see it. So I'm thinking about line and shape, and the buds have these tiny little fronds that sort of encapsulate the bottom of the bud there. So I'm trying to capture those and just keep them really, really thin. I'm making this illustration so that all of the green areas are sort of really, really dark. So all of the stems and leaves are just a nice simple black ink. And that's what you see me sort of filling in there. I've captured these thin, very thin, pointy leaves. So I'm really just looking again, as we talked about with the ranunculus, and trying to capture what is right there beside me. And I want to get those floppy petals, and they're similar to the ranunculus. I want to do a very jagged edge along the top of each petal because they do sort of look jagged to the eye because they have a bit of a curve to each petal. And I'm just layering petal on petal. Again, you're looking at it as the camera from a slightly different angle than I was, so that's why there might be some discrepancy, and because I'm not going to get it perfect, that too. And I'm just adding again some line shading here to show the depth in the flower. And I want to say that you can go a lot more detailed when it comes to botanical illustrations. If you look up botanical illustration on Google, you'll see some really amazing, almost scientific work. And you know, that's not what I'm getting into. I just want to be able to go out into the bush or into the garden or the forest and, you know, gather plants and sort of document them in my notebook. So I'm just trying my best to capture some of these things. I'm also sort of put my head right in the shot, so that's what you're seeing here. I like to get really, really close to the page when I draw, and I struggle with that when I'm filming. So you can see my two big floppy flowers, and then the Lisianthus also does have these larger leaves lower down on the stem, so that's what I'm drawing here and just sort of coloring it in. As I said, I wanted to just do all of the greenery, sort of dark black ink for contrast, and I'm just gonna add the name there, and that's another illustration in my journal all done. Well, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. As I always say, there's bonus tutorials as well as the weekly Friday tutorials, so you don't want to miss those. Subscribe, leave me a comment, and this week be sure to go find me on Instagram at Shayda Campbell. Yesterday was my birthday, and I also shared some exciting news about a certain art packaging that I designed. So because of those two events, I'm running a bunch of giveaways. I want you guys to enter so you can win. Come say hello on Instagram, and I will see you next week with a new tutorial. Thanks for watching.